Canada's economy served up a big surprise this morning, and not the good kind.
Bank of Canada held interest rates steady in their decision this week, but warned the ongoing risk is already causing inflation, and it could get worse.
This very clearly is the worst energy crisis of our lifetimes. We have lost over 11 million barrels per day of production.
The Canadian economy is teetering on a recession.
Economic problems around the world, the recessions. And today, only as of today, we lost 11 million barrels per day.
I have to tell you, though, we just went through the largest trade crisis we had ever seen. Now we're piling on another so-called supply shock. The difficult answer here is when we see things we've never seen before, we don't know exactly how they're all going to pan out.
Canada is in shock as the ongoing energy crunch puts heavy pressure on the economy, shaking confidence in markets and businesses alike. Prices are rising fast, and supply disruptions across major global shipping routes are tightening the flow of energy worldwide. A major international shipping choke point has faced disruption, and this has pushed oil prices sharply higher, triggering inflation that is hitting household budgets hard. Job losses are rising in several sectors, uncertainty is growing, and the economic foundation is showing cracks as pressure builds across the system. It's only the beginning of the fallout.
Well, gas pumps are among the first places that global consumers are feeling the pinch. Motorists are especially hard hit by higher fuel prices. The increases vary from country to country, with knock-on effects feeding through to the rest of the economy.
I didn't used to. I used to drive my kids to a lot of places. Now I can't afford that.
An estimated supply gap of around 11 million barrels per day has tightened global availability, with flows heavily restricted and markets adjusting in real time. While economic forums continue discussions, global markets are already reacting fast. Canada, once confident in its resource strength, is now facing the reality that global trade conditions are far more fragile than expected. Early estimates suggest that a major disruption caused significant short-term supply losses, with shipments paused, ports slowing down, and inventory levels tightening across the system. What you are seeing at fuel stations today is only the first wave of price adjustments hitting consumers.
The Prime Minister keeps talking about how he's going to reinforce our industry, how he's going to protect our economy or solidify our economy. But when you talk about industry and economy, you're often not talking about people. You're not talking about how that help is getting to people directly.
Fuel prices are climbing, with gasoline averaging around $1.70 per liter in many areas, and diesel costs crossing the $2 mark in some regions. Even with large natural resources, high domestic costs are making everyday transportation increasingly difficult for many households. This highlights a deeper economic imbalance, where resource wealth does not always translate into affordable living conditions for citizens. Every expense, from fuel to groceries to heating, reflects long-term structural pressures in the economy that are now being felt directly by families. Central banking authorities are closely monitoring inflation levels, which are trending above 3%, and they face limited options in stabilizing growth without causing additional economic strain.
In the West, pump prices have pushed past $2 per liter.
Well, it is what it is, you know. Can't do much about it.
The price for Quebecers is not far behind.
Yeah, of course, it's a big impact for us. As as a worker here in Canada, I feel so bad about it.
Raising interest rates could slow borrowing and reduce spending, but it may also weaken housing and business activity in already fragile conditions. On the other hand, keeping rates low could allow inflation to remain elevated, creating continued pressure on prices and savings. There is no easy solution, as the economy remains trapped between competing pressures that are difficult to balance. Supply chain limits are becoming more visible, and transportation networks are operating near full capacity, restricting how much energy can move through global markets. At the same time, global demand remains strong, keeping prices elevated even as supply struggles to keep up.
We don't have a strategic oil stockpile in Canada. We are the only G7 country without one. So I think it's another illusion for Mark Carney to pretend that he's releasing stockpiles that he does not have.
Infrastructure improvements have helped increase capacity over time, but current demand still exceeds what can be efficiently transported. Long-term expansion projects remain under discussion, with costs, regulations, and reviews all contributing to slower progress. And regulatory approvals are slowing everything down behind the scenes. While other major energy producers are locking in long-term supply deals with buyers across Asia and Europe, Canada is missing out on massive revenue opportunities because infrastructure expansion is stuck in delays and build-out limits. That means billions in potential income are slipping away, not because demand is weak, but because the system cannot physically move supply fast enough to match it. Let's break down what this energy price spike is really doing to the broader Canadian economy, because this is where things start to hit hard. Higher fuel costs do not stay at the pump, they ripple through everything.
Provinces not positioned to cash in on resource royalties are less likely to cut into their own bottom lines, leaving consumers to bear the brunt of what could be some tough weeks ahead.
This war is a political crisis, and we see it's never going to end. We don't have bombs, but we do have high prices for everything.
Farmers are getting slammed as fertilizer prices climb sharply, since it is tied directly to petrochemical inputs. That means wheat, beef, dairy, and eggs all cost more to produce, and those costs move straight into grocery prices without delay. The result is simple but brutal. Food inflation, already a major pressure point, is climbing again, and there is very little that can quickly reverse it. Once these production costs rise, they stick across the entire food chain. Transportation is also getting squeezed hard. Trucking companies moving goods across long domestic routes are burning through expensive diesel on every trip, and those extra costs only last briefly at the company level before being passed on to retailers. Retailers then adjust pricing to survive, and that adjustment lands directly on consumers. The entire supply chain is basically repricing itself upward in real time, and regular households are the ones absorbing it with no place to offload the burden.
The country lost 84,000 jobs last month. That's one of the worst monthly drops ever outside of the pandemic. Speaking from Norway, Prime Minister Mark Carney blamed U.S. tariffs.
Given the scale of the trade actions, the uncertainty that is associated as well as with the trade actions by the United States, that is causing big adjustments in the Canadian economy.
That means tighter budgets, lower savings, rising credit use, and growing financial pressure on mortgages and daily spending. The slowdown feeds on itself because less spending means weaker business activity, which then feeds back into hiring cuts. Then the latest employment data landed, and it showed a sharp drop, around 84,000 jobs lost in a single month. That scale of decline is one of the most significant recent downturns outside major crisis periods, and it is not just statistical noise. Businesses facing higher energy expenses, shrinking margins, and uncertain demand are reacting in a predictable way, slowing hiring, freezing expansion plans, and reducing workforce costs to stay afloat.
Canadians can't afford housing because of the war in Iran. Excuse me? That is nothing to do with house prices. We don't import wood to build houses or concrete to build houses from Iran. That's just completely wrong. And Evan Solomon, the AI minister, again started blaming these job numbers and the affordability crisis and February and January's job numbers on the Iran situation, which started in March.
The labor market that was previously described as stable is now showing visible cracks, and the timing makes the pressure even more intense across the economy. Different policy voices are now clashing over how to respond to rising costs. Some argue that the focus should be on expanding supply capacity and reducing infrastructure barriers, while others push for stronger cost relief measures and tighter control over pricing pressures. At the center of it all, decision makers are stuck between competing approaches because every option has trade-offs that affect growth, inflation, and investment confidence at the same time. Meanwhile, the currency is weakening, which might sound abstract but has very real consequences. A softer currency makes imports more expensive, and Canada relies heavily on imported electronics, machinery, and consumer goods. That means everyday items from food products to manufactured goods start to cost more, adding another layer of pressure on household budgets already stretched by energy and inflation shocks.
Unfortunately, we know that when gas prices rise, consumers, well, they have to allocate more money towards gasoline, and that means a little less money elsewhere, or it means they pull down on savings, or they have to use credit cards, or all of the above. So a little bit of consumer weakness here should be expected, but the magnitude of that and how long it lasts is still a question mark.
The result is a tightly connected chain reaction. Higher energy costs feed inflation, inflation slows demand, and slower demand weakens economic momentum even further. As the Canadian dollar slips lower against the US dollar, imported goods automatically become more expensive. That includes electronics, machinery, food products, and everyday consumer items that Canada relies on heavily. That cost pressure feeds straight into inflation without delay. It creates a self-reinforcing cycle where rising prices weaken confidence, weaker confidence pushes the currency down, and a weaker currency makes imports even more expensive. So you end up with a loop that keeps spinning. Energy costs push inflation up, inflation pressures the currency raises import costs, and import costs push inflation even higher. Breaking that cycle is not simple at all. It requires strong corrective action, but every aggressive move in a fragile economy comes with serious trade-offs and financial risk. At the same time, credit conditions are tightening across the financial system. Banks are becoming more cautious, reassessing risk across mortgages, business lending, and consumer credit portfolios.
Also a question mark is what happens to inflation with the impact of the war. We saw it below that 2% marker before the war, and so the Bank of Canada holding interest rates where they were, where they are now. But where might things be heading if Canadian families, Canadian business have to spend more for the very same products?
Well, the simple calculation is that if we have oil around $100 per barrel, you'll see inflation rise above 3%.
Households that already locked into variable rate mortgages during lower rate periods are now approaching renewals that look completely different from what they originally signed up for. That means higher monthly payments, tighter budgets, and less financial flexibility for families already under pressure. Small and medium-sized businesses are also feeling the squeeze. Many of them borrowed heavily to stay afloat in earlier downturn periods, and now they are dealing with higher operating costs while customer spending slows down. This combination, higher costs, tighter credit, and weaker demand, is exactly the kind of environment where business closures increase and unemployment tends to rise sharply. And this is not just a future risk scenario. Early warning signs are already appearing in economic data.
Oh, wow.
Folks filling up in Nova Scotia Tuesday paid an extra 7 cents per litre after a price adjustment overnight.
It affects everything from the top down.
It's the same story across the country. Prices on the West Coast approaching $2.17 and on the East Coast beyond $1.88. The national average at the pumps now $1.73.5 a litre.
Showing stress building across multiple sectors at the same time. Canada's liquefied natural gas sector was expected to be a major growth driver. With global buyers searching for alternative supply sources and rising demand in multiple regions, it was positioned as a strong export opportunity. But global energy markets have become increasingly unstable, and LNG pricing is now highly volatile across regions, reducing certainty for long-term planning. At the same time, Canada's export infrastructure for LNG is still developing, which limits how quickly potential supply can reach global markets. So even this potential growth area is being slowed down by capacity constraints and timing delays, reducing its ability to offset broader economic pressure.
The war in the Middle East and Iran's effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz has sent oil prices up about 57% this month, which has a ripple effect through global supply chains.
If you're not going to pay for it at the pump, you might pay for it when you're buying clothes. If you are buying shampoo, if you are buying deodorant, all of these things have petroleum in them.
What can you do? Like, we already drive as little as we can. Certainly we're making choices based on the prices.
Meanwhile, financial support measures and energy relief programs are being debated as potential tools to ease pressure on households. But every form of large-scale support in a high-cost environment carries trade-offs. especially when public borrowing is already elevated and inflation remains persistent. More spending can provide short-term relief, but it can also add pressure to overall price levels if not carefully balanced with productivity and supply growth. At the same time, long-term infrastructure expansion such as pipelines, LNG terminals, and transmission upgrades requires massive investment and extended timelines. These projects also face high borrowing costs and complex approval processes, which slow down execution when speed is most needed. That creates a difficult timing problem. The economy needs faster capacity growth, but the financial and structural conditions make rapid expansion harder to achieve.
A small time, it might be absorbed, but if things continue in the same pace, then it's going to be passed on to the consumer.
Canadians concerned about their cost of living now facing the impact of a war out of their control.
What is becoming clear is that long-standing delays in energy and infrastructure development are now showing up as direct economic pressure. Over many years, major projects have moved slowly through planning stages, redesigns, and regulatory reviews, which has limited how quickly supply capacity could expand. Meanwhile, other global producers have been able to scale infrastructure faster and secure long-term export positions in key markets. As a result, Canada holds significant natural resources but limited ability to fully convert them into market-ready supply at scale. That mismatch between resources and infrastructure is now translating into real economic strain, with missed opportunities in export revenue and reduced flexibility in global markets.
So, between those job losses and rising gas prices, could the political ground start to shift under the Prime Minister's feet?
And for households, this is not abstract at all. It shows up in everyday budgeting decisions. Families are balancing higher grocery costs, rising energy bills, mortgage payments, and transportation expenses all at the same time. When incomes stay relatively stable but costs keep rising, financial pressure builds quickly, forcing difficult trade-offs in daily spending. At its core, this situation reflects a system under strain from multiple directions at once. Currency pressure, inflation cycles, credit tightening, and infrastructure limits all interacting together. The outcome now depends heavily on whether investment, capacity expansion, and financial stability can catch up with rising demand pressures before the imbalance grows even further. And that's the situation for today on Yesterday Canada. If you want more updates like this, drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.